All right, Doug, today I want to talk about Bitcoin. Now, I remember for a long time you were a naysayer on Bitcoin, and then something changed in late 2015, I think, early 2016, where
2017 is when it was,
it was 2017. Okay.
close to the end.
So you, but
Close to
you,
the end.
but you got that major bull leg though, where it went all the way up to 20,000. You were in, and but I didn't hear any update. Has your view changed? Are you out now? Are you considering being in? What's your view on it?
Well, my story with Bitcoin uh, is a sad one from one point of view because I heard about it early on, and but then I caught the hyperbolic rise at the end. And although I wasn't an early buyer, my timing to sell was absolutely spot on. So I'll tell you what happened. I first really encountered it uh, in 2013 when a Belgian guy named Tour de Meester, I took him out to lunch in Cafajate in Argentina. And so Tour was promoting me on the concept. And I listened to it and I said, this sounds very interesting. In fact, he even gave me a physical Bitcoin, which actually exists. I've never examined the thing, but I guess it's got codes around that are written on it so I could actually turn it into
Yeah, it's got your key on it. Yep. Yeah.
It's in my safe deposit box, just sitting there. I haven't put it online yet. Uh, it's worth more than a Bitcoin because I guess it's kind of a collectible at this point. But anyway, here's the way I analyzed Bitcoin and why I was negative on it up until 2017. And I'll tell you what happened then. I said, look, okay, this is supposed to be money. All right, great. So what is money? And this was defined by Aristotle in the 4th century BC. And there are 5 characteristics of a good money that Aristotle defined. And it has to be durable, divisible, convenient, consistent, and has value in itself. So I analyzed it from that point of view. Durable. Yeah, Bitcoin is absolutely durable. It's not going to go away unless we have an asteroid strike or an EMP or a Carrington event of some other type. So yeah, it passes the durability test for money. That's why we can't use wheat for money because it's not durable. It'll rot after a season or two. Okay, Bitcoin, good from that point of view. Divisible. Yes, infinitely divisible. In fact, more divisible than gold if you wish. I mean, take it out to how many decimal places you want. It's mathematical. Perfect, okay. Durable, divisible, convenient. Yeah, I guess, because everybody carries a cell phone with them today, and your Bitcoin account is always with you. And of course, I guess technologically, the transfer of Bitcoin from one person to another is a little bit slow just because of the way the blockchain is set up. I don't know how many transactions can be done per second. What is it, like 20? I forget what the number is.
Yeah, I don't recall the exact number, but it's not a lot. But it's certainly faster than wiring money or any major banking transaction you might enter into.
Yep. So it passes the convenience test, which is why we don't use lead as money, because you just can't carry around a lot of lead with you. Okay, consistent. Yep, perfect. Every Bitcoin is just like every other Bitcoin, I guess. So that's why we don't use artwork as money, because every piece of artwork is different. Or real estate is money. Every piece of real estate is different. So that's why those things aren't used as money. And the big problem was durable, convenient, consistent. Yeah, okay. And the last thing is it had to have value in itself. And that's why I said, look, this thing can't be used as money. What's the value of this thing? Somebody's going to get stuck holding the bag if the bubble breaks, if people decide, these things are just tulip bulbs, okay? Which is kind of what it looked like to me with the vertical appreciation in its value relative to the dollar and everything. So I said, no, it's not going to work as money because it doesn't have any value uh, in and of itself. You can't do anything with it. It's a bubble. Well, I was wrong about that. And when I figured it out was I went to a conference in Aspen where I was a speaker in August of 2017. And I don't know where or how, but it became apparent to me that the value of Bitcoin is as a transfer mechanism. It's 75% of the people on the planet live in countries that have currencies that are basically worthless outside of the national borders. Like, here I am in Uruguay at the moment and often in Argentina. They both have pesos. They're worth nothing when you leave the country. They're just pieces of toilet paper. Mm. And it's like that with most of all of the countries in Africa. They use toilet paper basically for money. It's worth nothing outside of the Central Asia, everywhere, frankly. Big places like Indonesia, Vietnam. So it's neat from the point of view of the rulers because those people are trapped within the country unless they can find somebody to buy their their paper money for something that's good outside the country. But it's hard. How many people want to trade dollars for Zambian kwaches? Well, the tourists in the country, but
only if you have to.
Yeah, only if you have to. South African rand. I mean, we've got 3 or 4 million people of European descent that are left in South Africa, but they can't get their assets out of the country. Well, if they can trade their rand inside the country for Bitcoin, no problem. They can get it out of the country easily. So 75% of the people in the world could really use this for money, and that's its value. To evade foreign exchange controls, and also to evade taxes if you're of a mind to do that. So then I figured, yeah, that's of course the value. So what I did is, the way I played it was I put $100,000. I bought Bitcoin at, I don't know what I paid for it in August of that year, probably about, I don't know,
3,000 or 4,000.
Yeah, $1,000, $1,500, something like that. And then by the time the year end came, and it topped out at $20,000, I figured, you know what, this is just too much, too quickly. So it was a good trade. I retrieved my my initial investment, and I took a $50,000 profit and let the rest ride, which I still have, incidentally. So I don't know how many Bitcoins I've got left at this point. A couple, 3. I'll have to look. I don't do anything with it. I'm not a computer geek. I use my computer as a blunt instrument, basically. So
I could vouch for
anyway, that's my history with Bitcoin. If I listened to Tour when he first told me about it at $13, well, the thing is, yeah, I could have made scores of millions. On the other hand, what usually happens with these things is you sell too soon. I would have seen it went from 13 to 200, and I said, Jesus, that's a score. I'm dumping it, and I would have missed the big ride. This happens so often when people tell you these ridiculous stories about making, I made 103,213% on this stock investment. Look at you wouldn't know, chances of you riding it for that whole distance are slim and none.
Yep.
So
I agree. I bought some really early on, about $20 worth, and it was under $1 at the time. And I didn't think much of it. I was just experimenting. It was complicated to order it and all that. But I just lost it. I had it on a computer, and I probably 2 years after I bought it, I threw the computer away, and I bet there's landfills full of billions of dollars of Bitcoin. I'm sure mine certainly is part of that. But yeah, the woulda, coulda, what's the difference? I did buy it. I don't have it. You didn't buy it. You don't have it. We're kind of in the same boat. So what do you feel about it today, though?
Yeah, right. Well, whether I want to own something is always a question of price. Something that everything is a question of price in the material world anyway. So what do I feel about it today? There are still people that are talking about it going to $100,000 an ounce and more. And I don't know, it's possible because, every 4 years, the amount of Bitcoins that can be created by new mining halves and so forth. And lots of people lose them for all kinds of different reasons, and they disappear permanently. And there are only 23 million or something like that that can ever be created. So maybe with, accidents and stuff, maybe, who knows how many are still can be in existence. Nobody knows. 20 million, 15 million, nobody knows. Okay, so are they any good? Well, yeah, I think they are, because they still have those big advantages of being used as a transfer mechanism. I mean, that's a huge advantage, and allowing for tax-free trading if you're of a mind to do that. So yeah, it does have value, and yeah, during a currency crisis, it could go higher. And there was a sixth thing, incidentally, that makes for a good money that Aristotle did not mention, because it wasn't really an element back in those days, back in the 4th century BC. It's that it can't be created arbitrarily out of nothing.
Mm.
I'm sure if he was listing those things today, he would have had to have mentioned that.
Yeah,
So,
non-fiat.
which is why you shouldn't use paper as money,
Mm.
incidentally.
Mm.
So, yeah, I'm all for Bitcoin. I'm all for Bitcoin in theory, in principle, all for it. And I guess I'm for it in practice too. But
If you
problem
could,
is you always have to have your cell phone with you if you want to do something. So for like day-to-day commerce, I don't even like to carry a cell phone, quite frankly, for all kinds of different reasons. Uh, so for me, it doesn't work really very well. But yeah,
so
I
I,
think it could go higher.
so today it's about $10,700. So if you didn't own any at this point, would you, knowing, the way you see the dollar and the way you see gold and other things, would you, would you make a, would you create a position today? Would you buy some today if you didn't own any?
Yeah, I think I probably would. But yes, I think I would, because we're going to have a dollar crisis at some point. There's going to be a panic out of the dollar and perhaps all paper currencies, because all of the central banks in the world are all printing up new currency units by the truckload, by the trillions. All of them are. It's not just the US, the Chinese, the Japanese, the Europeans, they're all doing this. They're going to destroy all of these currencies. So Bitcoin is going to prove a good alternative. And the answer to the question is, yeah, if you don't have any Bitcoin, you should buy some. I should probably even buy some more based on that. Yeah, but there are problems with Bitcoin in addition that aren't listed among these 6 characteristics of a good money. And one of them is that what happens when Bitcoin 2.0 springs upon the scene? Something that is better than Bitcoin as a money, still a cryptocurrency, but better, more private, easier to use, faster transactions, just in a much improved Bitcoin. So at that point, people are going to say, well, I want that Bitcoin 2.0 or whatever it's called, and they'll dump their old Bitcoin, and the value of the old Bitcoin goes down. And so that's a big problem. I don't know. What do you think? You know about
There
computers more
are
than I do.
there are lots of other cryptocurrencies today that basically do address some of those things. One where where it can be more private, like Monero, which is one that's more private. One that might has a different value in and of itself, maybe like Ethereum. But I think I think that the transition, not to say it wouldn't happen from one to another, but just like how the transfer hasn't, the people who still see long-term value in owning gold as money, not every gold bug has switched their gold for Bitcoin because it's the new gold, you know? And I imagine that if that does happen, where there is something that is clearly better, because I think many people would argue that Bitcoin is better than gold in terms of serving the purposes of gold. Because,
Yeah,
like you said,
in some ways, can be.
I mean, carrying around lead is a lot like carrying around gold. Now, I know you have a lot of value per ounce, but I mean, it's a lot. It's harder like that. And you actually, all you really have to have with Bitcoin is you can memorize a series of words actually, and you don't or have it in your wallet, and so you don't have to necessarily have an electronic form. You can
Mhm.
reconstitute the Bitcoin if you have the seed for it or the private key. Um, but in any case, I think if there is a transition, the transition would take time. If there's a new thing, and because there have been attempts at this, and they've all frankly failed compared to at least as replacing Bitcoin. And I agree with you that Bitcoin is not the e-commerce. Its service is not about buying a cup of coffee. And although I bought Bitcoin really early, I was hung up on this idea for a long time myself. I was like, I just don't see what it's good for. But I came to the same conclusion you did, but just about a year before you did. Well, it was at the end of 2015, actually, is that China instituted some capital controls in 2015. And they've always had a lot, but they instituted some new ones. And what you saw, one of the gripes against Bitcoin was that all the volume was happening in China, all the volume of transactions. So maybe it's not even real. But when you looked at it, you go, oh no, that makes perfect sense. So they instituted capital controls, and now there's a huge amount of activity in China. And it's like they're just using it to transfer the value out of the country. And as soon as I realized that, then I came to this exact same conclusion that you had, which is that it has value in and of itself as a transfer mechanism. And then I started buying some, in early 2016. So um, in any case, you're right though. There could always be a new thing. And I think, also from a technology point of view, there is some worry about the encryption that if quantum computing comes into fruition, that
Mhm.
all encryption today would be, could disappear. And in that case, that could really hurt the system.
Yes, that does make sense, actually. It's always in all spheres of life, certainly including the military sphere, it's a question of the defense and the offense always upping the ante against
Yep.
each other. And now, I guess the offense against Bitcoin might be the quantum computing that can crack the code and so forth. Yeah, the blockchain, which is the Phil Zimmerman who designed the you couldn't export. What's the code that he designed that I'm talking about with the open
Honestly, I
key
don't
and
know.
closed key? Where you have an open
The private key system.
private key system, right?
Yep.
Is that
Private
what
key,
it's
public
called?
key. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, he came to the Eris Society one year, something I ran for 30 years, where we had all kinds of really interesting, wild, and crazy people from all walks of life. They just had to be people that had done something important that made them well known or made them the kind of person that other people would want to meet. So Phil came to Eris one year. That was at the time when the use of the private key, public key system, which he invented, was considered a military weapon, and you
Mm.
couldn't export it, except for the fact that the mathematics behind it, you could write it on a t-shirt and export it right in front of them, and there's nothing they could do about it. It shows how stupid these governments are on a basic level. But yeah, I guess I could have invested with him because he was looking for money to promote it. I don't know if he ever made any money personally from it, but even though I like these things in principle and I understand these things in principle, as a practical matter, you got to know what you don't know. Like Clint Eastwood says, man's got to know his limitations.
Mm-hmm.
So throwing money at deals where you just don't even know what can go wrong. You don't even know the questions to ask. I didn't get involved in that. I mean, I had another chance to make millions of dollars on this. There was a friend of mine who's become a friend of mine. He wasn't a friend then. I didn't know him from Adam, from Norway. And he knows that I like these kind of things. And he reached out to me about Monero. He wanted me to lend him 10 grand to buy Monero, which I think was 50 cents. I remember that at the time. And I said, listen, it's a good story you build about it, but I don't know you. So if I send you 10,000 bucks, you seem like a nice guy, but how do I know I'll ever get it back? I mean, I'm just being candid. So I didn't. And I don't know, what did Monero run to? I mean, 50 bucks or something? I don't know.
No, more than that. I thought it got to about 150.
Hmm.
I'm
Well,
actually.
of course, we would have sold too soon, needless to say. But these opportunities come up. And of course, now this guy's, we've become quite friendly, actually, over the subsequent years.
So
But
actually,
I would lend him 10,000 bucks, but somehow he got it, and he doesn't need anybody to lend him money anymore because
right. Monero got to 542, by the way. I just checked.
Oh, that would have been sweet. It would have been 1,000 to one shot. 10,000 bucks would have been 10 million. Yeah. If we'd held on till the peak.
If you'd held on. Yep.
Yeah.
You'd held on. So today, so even at this, so I guess, how would you compare the way I started to think of Bitcoin is that it's like a version, it's similar to gold in that, in terms of it has the same basic, if you have a certain percentage of your portfolio you would otherwise have just in owning physical gold, maybe you have a portion of that you set aside for Bitcoin. In addition to that, I mean, to me, I equate them very similarly. You don't want too much risk in either one, but how do you think of it?
Well, I really should get more Bitcoin, I guess, at this point, because if we're going into a monetary crisis, and we are, I think Bitcoin is going to become a very popular asset. So I think I'm going to have to take it much more seriously. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah. Well, I guess if you think about it in your portfolio, do you intuitively feel Bitcoin as it's something more like a mining stock, which is much more upside, but much more downside? Or do you see it more like gold itself?
Yeah, I think the problem with Bitcoin, it's like what I said, it's that it could disappear catastrophically under certain circumstances, electromagnetic circumstances, but then my gold could disappear catastrophically if somebody steals it. So there's risks in both things. It's better to be diversified so that, I think I've got to buy more Bitcoin. I feel good about Bitcoin now. It's stabilized. It hit that peak. It's leveled out after going, I think it went back down to about 3,000 after the 20,000 peak, roughly.
It did, yes. Yes, it has.
And now it's been trading at around 10,000 for a long time. And more people are getting to know it. And everybody in a blocked currency country, which will include, incidentally, the United States in the years to come, because undoubtedly, as things get out of control here in the United States, they're going to government never controls itself, it just controls its subjects. And so they will put currency controls on the US that's going to make it inconvenient, hard, maybe impossible under some circumstances to get your money out of the country. So at that point, lots of people in the US are going to be buying Bitcoin because a good way to evade the controls. So I am bullish on Bitcoin, quite frankly, for those reasons. And I've been remiss. I think it's time that I bought a bit more, quite frankly.
Good. Me too. Actually, I've been buying since it sort of bottomed out in the 3,500 range. But yeah, I mean, every time I think about it, I think, yeah, I could probably use a little more. Because to me, it has seemed, it's not as obvious today as it was in 2016, when it was, still, a little under, it was in the hundreds. It was like $600, if I recall. It reminded me of gold in the very beginning of the bull market in the 2000s. As it just started, I wasn't there for the bottom, but as it started to get some momentum, and it was, I started to accumulate over $300 and $400. It kind of felt like that in the way it was, but it was all accelerated. The time frame was just moving way faster, and
Yeah.
I mean, Bitcoin feels like it's like a boom bust market with a general uptrend, but it's uh, everything is compressed. By it's basically something would normally take a year. It's basically it can do this, and historically it could do it in like 2 months.
The only thing that scares me about Bitcoin is the possibility of Bitcoin 2.0, at which point everybody wants to dump Bitcoin to get the better money. I mean,
Yep.
what about that?
Well, I would say the same thing. Okay, so you remember there was that frenzy. Part of the things that caused the big, blow off top in Bitcoin in what was it, 2018, I guess.
It was like the first, I think it peaked at like very early in January 2018
Okay.
is when it hit the peak.
Part of it was
Like,
they had all these new ICOs that were happening, all these
mm,
launches of these new cryptocurrencies. Now, the thing with all of them and why Bitcoin did well is that Bitcoin was essentially the on ramp for all of those. It's almost like, to take your fiat money and convert it and to buy any of these other cryptos, you had to buy Bitcoin first because there wasn't the system to, even as the technology improves really quickly in everything, but the intersection between our old, very archaic, very dumb money system essentially and that digital world evolves very, very slowly. So basically the on-ramp to all of those other ones for the most part was Bitcoin. So you had to exchange dollars into Bitcoin, and then from Bitcoin you could go into these other things. Now I imagine that, if Bitcoin 2.0 comes out all of a sudden, the mechanism still for getting in and out of that Bitcoin 2.0 at first is unlikely to be something, directly from fiat currency into that. It's still going to have to go through the pipes that exist today, I would imagine, at least at first. So I think you'd have plenty of early warning if you're paying attention.
yeah, I guess you're right. There really are advantages to being the first mover in a space. On the other hand, it's often said, you don't want to you don't want, from a business point of view, you don't want to try to be the first mover because it's the pioneers that get the arrows in the back. So, but Bitcoin's past it. It's the first mover. Everybody knows it and loves it. But of course, it set off that tulip bubble mania with hundreds, thousands, I guess, of new uh, cryptos that came out, some of which appear to have, I mean, I don't know. I just know what I read because I don't play with them, but they have utility. But isn't the problem with these new cryptos that have come out, some of which have real value, some of which are well-known scams, that they can create any number of units, unlike Bitcoin? I don't think anything else is limited the way Bitcoin is it? I don't know.
There are some that are limited, but I think for the most part they're designed to serve some other purpose. And for me, I think investing in, or I'd say speculating in any of the other cryptocurrencies, for me, requires a level of sophistication, like being an angel investor might, investing in specific companies. I mean, it's risky. It requires special expertise, I think, and then people who, there's some people who come onto the scene and tout themselves as experts in all of these technologies and whatever. But as far as I'm concerned, a lot of those people who traded in and out of those other cryptocurrencies during the tulip mania period would have just been a hell of a lot better off if they just would have stayed with Bitcoin. They would have been way better off because there were huge appreciations in some of these because you could buy I got, Ethereum at about 8.50, I think $8.50, so that was like that. Yeah, that was really, really good. But still and I did well with that, but my Bitcoin went up a ton too. So I think the biggest thing is it requires a level of expertise that's very difficult to have, that I don't think I have. Technical expertise to understand what's real and what's not, especially in that hype machine that was the tulip bubble, as you say. And Bitcoin, I equate much more to like, it feels more like gold to me, but it has the speculative upside potential of a gold stock. That's the way it feels to me anyway.
Yeah, yeah, I'd agree with that assessment. And it's great for safety because if they lock down the US currency-wise, so you can't really take your money out of the country, you're going to wish you had Bitcoin at that point, and it's going a lot higher because everybody's going to want to buy it for just that reason.
I think so too. And if
So
nothing else, if they're going to debase the currency, also, like it's just you have to imagine something that cannot be, uh, that cannot be, its value will, like gold might go up relative to the dollar. The value, at least, has a chance of being retained in it. You know what I mean? Because it is, they can't create more like gold.
yeah,
So. So
yeah,
I just want to ask you one question about you happen to know pretty well this larger than life figure in who's stepped into the crypto space and is quite sensational and a little crazy for sure, but very entertaining. And that's McAfee, John McAfee. And didn't like I know you spent a little time with him, and he's just interesting guy, and he's certainly into the cryptos. I don't know. I heard that he was arrested yesterday. I don't know if that's true or not, but um, I just curious, maybe you can relay your experience with him and, what his view, I assume you guys talked about crypto when you guys were together.
yeah, we did. Uh, I I went to his house in Nashville, uh, and we stayed overnight and hung out and drove back to the airport together, which was close to 2 hours from his house. And I like John. He's a fun guy. He's a wild man, but he's a lot of fun. Great company. Uh, and we had a lot of things in common, quite frankly, like he's a gun guy. He's always strapped. He's always carrying heat. And I don't do that because guns are bulky and they draw attention to you and all this type of thing. Although I love guns and have lots. So we talked about that and the state of the world and get along. I get along fine with them. Haven't really been in touch with them, although we were going to go to the Solomon Islands together. Now this is kind of crazy, isn't it? But that was on the runway. We were going to take off for the Solomon Islands. Most people don't know where the hell they are. They're kind of in the middle of nowhere, near New Guinea and Australia, that part of the world. They're famous because the biggest of the Solomons is Guadalcanal. So that's why they're famous. But there are about 700 islands in that chain. Anyway, I had an introduction to the newly elected president there, and one of the arrows in my quiver for one of my longtime hobbies, which is going to third world countries and try to talk the powers that be into turning their shithole country into Singapore on steroids. One of the arrows in my quiver would be to do something with the national currency. And so I thought, well, this is a good reason to bring John along with me, because he's got, he's well known, he's got lots of credibility and expertise in the area. So that was set up. And it didn't happen. But because then before it happened, he got involved in some type of a scandal where he was kind of pay for play with cryptocurrencies. And this thing in Spain, there's no extradition treaty in the world, to my knowledge, that will allow people to be extradited for, I researched this when I wrote the book, The International Man, years ago. Extradition treaties always rule out tax violations, political violations. So you can't have somebody extradited because they committed a political crime, or religious violations. Those are the three things you can't be extradited for. But of course, the US government, as powerful as it is, kind of the world's new Rome. It doesn't matter. So I guess they got the SEC involved in it, saying that he violated security laws. And whether that is an extraditable offense, security laws, they'll call it fraud, is the way they'll try to get around it. So it depends, it's up to a Spanish judge, whether he's pro or con, John McAfee, whether he'll get extradited. And then when he comes back to the US, they'll throw the book at him because he's a bad boy. And it's a tragedy. So, you know, McAfee, although he may have, I don't know, maybe he committed some common law crimes to do with promoting these currencies. I have no idea. But it could be the US government puts him in the same cage as Snowden and
Assange
and Ross Ulrich, who was the guy that got hung out to dry for running Silk Road. You know, they like to do that, make examples of people, whether they deserve it or not. So yeah. I wish John well. Well, so but we're not going to the Solomon Islands anymore.
Yeah, that's too bad. So we should talk about this hobby of yours at another call, because you have a lot of interesting stories. You know, these different countries you've gone to. I had the pleasure of going to one of these with you. It was a incredible experience. Certainly incredible experience. But we should talk about that another time, because it's a whole interesting
different subject.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be fun. And I've never ever written an article about exactly what happened in these. I think I've done about a dozen countries where I've sat down with the national leader, or at least tried to sit down with them. Always get to the level below them. Usually get to the national leader, like we did when we went to Palau. But yeah, we should do that, because I've never written about that, and it'll be lost in the mists of history if I get hit by a bus tomorrow on the way to the airport.
That would be a tragedy. So yes, let's put that on the list of what we'll do, you know, in the coming calls. But the short answer here to this one about Bitcoin is that you're a believer, and it's prudent to own some, even at $10,700 or whatever it is today.
Yep. That's exactly the way I feel about it. Okay. You've got to own Bitcoin, and you've got to own gold for the same reasons and for different reasons. And right. And speculate in gold stocks. We could actually talk, you know, I do a lot of these interviews on various people's podcasts about, you know, why they should buy gold stocks now as a speculative medium, but that's something else we could talk about in the future.
We should.
Everybody, I think I already did the drill on gold. Didn't we do one on that already?
We talked about gold, yes, as a kind of a primer for, you know, for the more speculative side, which is the gold stocks. So I think, yeah, I'll have that on the list, and then I have the, you know, your personal hobby on the list. Yeah. So we'll get to those.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, that's super, Matt.
Awesome. Thank you, Doug. Appreciate it.
Talk to you later.